Hey guys! Tonight we're diving into the scandalous lives of history's most infamous queenswomen who wielded power with a mix of cunning, cruelty, and, yes, outright perversion. Picture this. You're in 6th century Constantinople, the air thick with incense and intrigue. As a former actress and courtesan climbs her way to the throne, not just through beauty, but through sheer, ruthless ambition. You wouldn't last 5 minutes in her world. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Theodora's rise, from brothel to throne. Reborn into poverty in 6th century Constantinople, where the hippodrome's roar echoes through the slums, and survival means bending the world to your will. Theodora, daughter of a bearkeeper, starts her career as a child actress, a euphemism for work that often blurred into sex work. By her teens, she's infamous for her erotic performances, one of which supposedly involved geese and a stage trick that would make a sailor blush. Historians still argue whether these tales are fact or slander, but either way, Theodora knew the power of spectacle. Then comes the turning point, a religious awakening or a calculated rebrand. She leaves the stage, converts to a fringe Christian sect, and catches the eye of Justinian, heir to the Byzantine throne. Their marriage shocks the empire. Senators sneer at the ex-courtesan, now sharing the imperial purple. But Theodora doesn't just occupy the throne, she reshapes it. When the Nika riots nearly toppled Justinian, it's Theodora who refuses to flee. Snarling, purple makes a fine shroud. Her defiance saves the empire. Yet behind the political genius lies a woman with a vindictive streak. She creates laws punishing rape with castration. And rumor says she kept a dungeon for enemies, including one general she allegedly locked in a sewer until he rotted. Mainstream history paints her as a feminist icon, but was she a reformer or just settling scores? And here's the quirky tidbit. She supposedly bathed in ass's milk to keep her skin flawless. Turns out, Cleopatra wasn't the only one with a dairy-based skincare routine. The flickering torchlight casts shadows across the palace walls as Justinian paces, his advisors whispering about the latest crisis, but his mind keeps drifting back to her. You can almost smell the scented oils clinging to the silk drapes as Theodora reclines on her divan, watching him with those dark, knowing eyes. This isn't just a marriage, it's an obsession that will redefine an empire. Justinian's obsession, love, or strategy. Imagine being the most powerful man in Byzantium, yet utterly enslaved to one woman. Justinian wasn't just Theodora's husband. He was her most devoted political pawn. When she demanded the death penalty for rapists, he made it law. When she wanted her enemies humiliated, he looked the other way as their estates were seized. The mainstream historical record claims theirs was a great love story. But let's be real, no emperor elevates a former erotic performer to co-ruler without calculating the advantages. Theodora brought something priceless to the throne: street smart, political instincts. While Justinian dreamed of reconquering Rome, she understood the mobs of Constantinople better than any blue-blooded senator. During the Nika riots, when his advisors begged him to flee, it was Theodora's famous speech about imperial dignity that stiffened his spine. Historians still argue whether that moment revealed a deep emotional bond or just expert manipulation. Here's the quirky detail that makes you question everything. Justinian changed imperial law twice, specifically for Theodore first to allow actresses to marry nobility, then to legalize her own daughter conceived before their marriage as a legitimate heir. That's not just love, that's rewriting the rulebook. And now for the scandalous fringe theory. Some scholars whisper about Theodora may have been running an underground network of former courtesans as imperial spies. One chronicler claims she could blackmail half the Senate with their brothel receipts. Whether true or not, it explains why so many powerful men suddenly developed loyalty to the emperor's controversial wife. As you drift off tonight, picture Justinian lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the most dangerous person in his empire is sleeping beside him. The man rebuilt the Hagia Sophia, reconquered Italy, and created a legal code that shaped Europe, but history remembers him first as the man who couldn't say no to Theodora. The scent of burning parchment fills the air as Theodora's spies deliver their latest reports. You can almost hear the nervous gulp of a corrupt official realizing too late that the Empress keeps very thorough records. This isn't just Justice Eats personal. Theodora's revenge, feminist or tyrant. Picture Constantinople's back alleys, where Theodora once walked as a powerless girl, and where she now sends her guards to drag rapists from their beds. Her new laws promise brutal punishment: castration, flaying, or worse for men who assault women. The aristocracy scoffs at this vulgar justice, but in the slums, women whisper her name like a prayer. Is this feminism centuries ahead of its time, or just a former courtesan settling old scores? Theodora doesn't stop at legal reform. When General Belisarius, Rome's greatest conqueror, dares to oppose her, she allegedly locks his wife Antonina in a palace dungeon for months. When a senator mocks her past, he's found floating in the Bosphorus with his tongue cut out. Even Justinian learns to tread carefully. One chronicler claims she kept a poisoned ring for husband and empire alike should either disappoint. Her historians still argue whether her infamous convent for fallen women was a charitable refuge or a gilded prison for rivals. The mainstream record praises her for banning forced prostitution, but the fringe accounts tell darker tales, like the nobleman's daughter who refused Theodora's protection and mysteriously vanished during a bathhouse fire. Here's the bizarre detail that changes everything. Theodora may have staged her own death scene. Some texts suggest she faked a terminal illness to test Justinian's loyalty, only to recover after he promised to name her relatives as heirs. Whether true or not, it's the ultimate power move. Even her demise was negotiable as your eyelids grow heavy. Imagine the Empress's final smirk as she rewrites her own legend. The brothel girl turned sovereign didn't just break the rules, she burned the rulebook and danced in its ashes. The torches gutter low in the imperial palace as midnight oil burns. You can almost hear the rustle of silk sheets and hushed giggles from behind gilded doors. While Emperor Claudius pores over state documents, his wife is otherwise occupied. Messalina's marathon, Rome's insatiable empress picture. This, Rome. 48 AD. The brothel's sticky floor clings to your sandals as you push past drunken patrons. In the back room, a veiled noblewoman competes with the establishment's star courtesan to see who can bed more men in a single night. When dawn breaks, the Empress Messalina emerges victorious minus 25 partners to her rival's 10. Historians still debate whether this infamous contest actually happened. But the story persists because it fits everything we know about Rome's most scandalous empress. Messalina wasn't just unfaithful, she was strategic about it. While Claudius focused on conquering Britain, his teenage wife turned the imperial palace into her personal playground. She'd sneak out at night disguised as a common prostitute, not for money, but for the thrill of power. The mainstream historical record shows she manipulated Claudius into executing rivals, including the philosopher Seneca, who survived to write about her depravity. Here's the quirky detail that changes everything. Messalina may have been behind Rome's first known sex club. The historian Tacitus describes her presiding over marriage games where elite couples swapped partners at her command. Was this political theater to control Rome's aristocracy, or just a bored empress entertaining herself. All the fringe accounts get darker. Some claim she forced noble women into her bed, then blackmailed their husbands. Others whisper she poisoned lovers who disappointed her. When she finally went too far, publicly marrying her lover while still wed to Claudius, even her legendary hold over the emperor snapped. As you drift toward sleep, imagine Messalina's last moments, clutching her children as soldiers kicked down the door, realizing too late that in ancient Rome, even an empress's power had limits. The scent of donkey milk and crushed rose petals hangs thick in the air as Papaya Sabina sinks deeper into her marble bath. You can almost hear the nervous whispers of her attendants. One wrong move, and they might join the growing list of neat shear, neat screw. And they might join the growing list of not neat, my noche, LST. I be above commend. You might see him to be, my news. Ni meek, Malen, you might. May not my news. I commide, my sit. I might ked, I might, by light, by my mids a cat of so the bide eyes on. My say lela ple re skikaist, pnsi sikrik kai sikik discussik gikik I sadikit sidik guided the dit at week mulp. This is Suicides in Nero's court. Papaya's milk baths. Beauty and brutality. Picture yourself in 1st century Rome, where the emperor's wife bathes daily in the milk of 500 donkeys to maintain her legendary complexion. The stable hands say the beasts are better treated than most senators. At least they get to keep their heads. Papaya didn't just marry Nero. She orchestrated her rise with calculated cruelty, allegedly kicking her pregnant rival in the stomach until she miscarried. Historians still argue whether Papaya was truly the schemer ancient sources portray, or simply a convenient scapegoat for Nero's worst impulses. The mainstream record shows she convinced Nero to murder his own mother, Agrippina, but the fringe accounts suggest even she grew frightened of his instability. Here's the bizarre detail that changes everything. Papaya may have invented the first ghostwriter scandal. When Nero wanted to appear literary, she allegedly hired philosophers to compose his speeches while keeping them imprisoned in her country villa. Their payment: continued breathing. The darkest whispers claim Papaya's famous beauty regimen included nightly applications of slave's blood as a facial treatment. Whether true or not, her reign ended abruptly when Nero, in a fit of rage, kicked her pregnant belly, killing both mother and child. Even for Rome, it was too much as sleep takes you. Imagine Papaya's final moments, staring at the cracked bathhouse tiles as her lifeblood mixes with the donkey milk. Realizing too late that in Nero's Rome, no one stayed beautiful forever. The flickering candlelight dances across the walls of the hotel St. Paul, as Queen Isabeau of Bavaria adjusts her jeweled headdress. Outside, Parisian mobs scream for blood, but inside, the Queen's chambers smell of rosewater and scandal. Isabeau of Bavaria, France's scandalous regent, to find yourself in 15th century France, where King Charles VI suffers bouts of madness so severe he doesn't recognize his own wife. While the king howls that he's made of glass, Isabeau takes the reins of government and allegedly several lovers. The court whispers that her children might not be the king's, particularly the future Charles VII, whose legitimacy Joan of Arc would later champion. Historians still debate whether Isabeau was a capable regent maintaining stability or a self-indulgent queen who accelerated France's collapse. The mainstream record shows she negotiated the disastrous Treaty of Troyes, which disinherited her son in favor of England's Henry V, but the fringe accounts suggest she may have been playing a longer game, secretly funding resistance, even as she publicly acquiesced to English demands. Here's the quirky detail that changes. everything, Isabeau might have invented political spin. When her lavish spending caused outrage, she commissioned news poems to justify her expenditures as necessary for maintaining royal dignity. It was medieval propaganda, complete with rhyming couplets. The darkest rumors claim she held flying dinners, feasts where guests dangled from ropes in an basi-malute, and an aerial ballet while musicians played. Whether these actually happened or were just slander by her enemies, they paint a picture of a court dangerously detached from the suffering outside its walls, as sleep pulls at your eyelids. Imagine Isabeau's final years, watching from exile. As her son reclaimed France, her legacy reduced to salacious rumors about her love life and spending habits. The queen who ruled during madness ultimately became history's scapegoat for it. The dungeon air is thick with the scent of damp stone and fear as Queen Margaret of Burgundy descends the spiral staircase, her silk gown whispering against the steps. The prisoners don't know whether to be relieved or terrified. Their queen has come to inspect them personally, and she's not wearing a stitch under her fur-lined cloak. Margaret of Burgundy is the naked tour guide Dior in 14th century France, where royal scandals don't get more bizarre than this. Margaret married to King Louis X, but famously unfaithful, allegedly. Conducted prison inspections in the nude. Some chroniclers claim it was to humiliate the inmates. Others suggest she was testing her own allure on men deprived of women's company. Historians still argue whether these stories are factual or political slander. But they persist because Margaret's life was stranger than fiction. The mainstream historical record confirms. She was imprisoned for adultery in Château Galliard. After the Tour de Nesle affair, where 3 princesses were caught in an infidelity scandal that rocked France. But the fringe accounts tell wilder tales like Margaret demanding her lovers wear animal masks during trisques, or keeping a trophy belt of their signet rings. Here's the quirky detail that changes everything. Margaret may have inspired the phrase "cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey." During her imprisonment, she reportedly had an affair with a guard, leading to whispers that the dungeon's frigid temperatures didn't dampen her enthusiasm, the darkest. Rumors claim she smuggled messages to her supporters using wax seals pressed against her bare skin. Whether true or not, her mysterious death imprisoned officially from chill. Though contemporaries suspected strangulation, closed the book on one of medieval Europe's most scandalous lives. As you drift off, picture Margaret's final winter in that stone cell, pressing her palms against the frozen walls. Her breath visible in the cold air, still defiant even as the kingdom forgot her. The wedding torches flicker ominously as Queen Joan of Naples adjusts her jeweled dagger beneath her bridal veil. You can almost hear the nervous murmurs of the guests. No one forgets what happened to her last husband on their wedding night. Joan of Naples' wedding night bloodbath. Picture Naples. 1346. The 17-year-old queen marries her cousin Andrew of Hungary in a lavish ceremony. But the feast hides deadly intentions. As the wine flows freely, Joan's new husband makes the fatal mistake of publicly declaring he'll claim equal royal power. That night, Andrew is found strangled in the palace gardens, his body dangling from a balcony with a noose so artfully tied. Historians still argue whether it was murder or a staged suicide. The mainstream record shows Joan's swift remarriage to another lover fueled suspicions, but the fringe accounts reveal wilder details. Some claim she watched the murder from a hidden alcove while eating candied violets. Others whisper she tested poisons on Andrew for weeks beforehand, growing frustrated when his robust constitution resisted them. Here's the bizarre twist. Joan may have pioneered forensic countermeasures. When pressured to investigate the murder, she allegedly had the crime scene scrubbed with lemon juice and rosewater not for cleanliness. But because 14th century forensics used odor analysis to detect blood, the darkest rumors suggest Joan's violent tendencies were genetic. Her grandmother, also named Joan, supposedly stabbed her own husband to death with a hairpin. Whether true or not, younger Joan's reign ended decades later when she was smothered with a silk pillow. Curiously gentle death for such a violent queen. As sleep takes you. Imagine Joan's final moments, the weight of brocade curtains pressing down her assassin's hands, trembling, as she realizes too late that in Naples, wedding vows were never just promises, they were threats. The stables reek of sweat and leather as Catherine the Great's favorite stallion paws impatiently at the hay-strewn floor. Outside, the Winter Palace buzzes with horrified whispers, but the Empress merely adjusts her riding gloves with a smirk. She knows exactly how rumors spread and how to weaponize them. Catherine the Great's horse myth, debunking the ultimate slander year in 18th century St. Petersburg, where Enlightenment ideals clash with medieval superstitions. The most persistent myth about Russia's longest-reigning female ruler, that she died attempting intimate relations with a horse. This absurd story originated with her anomenus, the same men who couldn't comprehend a woman outmaneuvering them. Politically, militarily, and intellectually, historians still argue whether Catherine's secretary intentionally spread the rumor, posthumously to discredit her progressive reforms. The mainstream record shows she actually died of a stroke in her privy chamber, a fact her detractors found equally humorous. But the fringe accounts reveal a more fascinating truth. Catherine kept extensive diaries documenting her 21 lovers, yet never mentioned anything equine, just detailed political analyses alongside surprisingly poetic romantic passages. Here's the quirky detail that changes everything. Catherine may have encouraged the rumors herself. Court documents show. She once quipped, "Better they laugh about my fictional stallion than fear my very real army." The horse myth conveniently overshadowed her actual scandals, like having her husband Peter III murdered, then ruling alone for 34 spectacularly successful years. The darkest whispers suggest her final lover, Platon Zubov, orchestrated the horse rumor to divert attention from his embezzlement. Whether true or not, the legend persists because it reveals more about historical misogyny than about Catherine herself. Brilliant ruler reduced to a dirty joke. As you drift off, picture Catherine's ghost in the Hermitage, rolling her eyes at yet another tourist giggling over the horse story while ignoring her real legacy, expanding Russia's borders further than any ruler since Peter the Great. Asterisk, the Vatican's candlelight flickers across Lucretia Borgia's golden hair as she absent-mindedly spins an ornate ring on her finger. You can almost taste the metallic temps of fear in the air as dinner guests eye their wine goblets suspiciously. Lucretia Borgia's poison ring, fact versus fiction picture. Rome at the turn of the 16th century, where the Borgia family's reputation precedes them like a dark cloud. Lucretia, the Pope's daughter, stands at the center of it, all accused of everything from incest to mass murder via poisoned wine. But here's what really keeps historians up at night. Was she a ruthless manipulator, or just a pawn in her family's bloody rise to power? The mainstream historical record shows Lucretia was married off 3 times for political advantage, with 2 husbands dying suspiciously. But the fringe accounts tell wilder tales, like her alleged cantarella poison, supposedly distilled from a secret recipe involving decomposed pork, which would have made victims' corpses bloat grotesquely. Modern chemists confirm no such toxin existed, but the myth persists because it fits our image of Renaissance intrigue. Here's the quirky detail that changes everything. Lucretia may have invented modern PR spin. When rumors swirled about her pregnancy during a period without a husband, she publicly displayed a miraculously swollen abdomen that turned out to be a cushion, then revealed the stunt to prove how easily people believe gossip. Historians still argue whether her famed poison ring was real or just a psychological weapon. Recent archive discoveries show she actually owned a hollow ring, but it contained perfume. The darkest truth. Lucretia's real crime may have been surviving in a world that punished powerful women. Her later years as Duchess of Ferrara reveal. A patron of the arts who transformed her court into a Renaissance cultural hub, as sleep claims you. Imagine Lucretia smiling enigmatically from her portrait, knowing the most potent poison isn't in wine, it's in the stories people tell about you. The Vatican's candlelight flickers across Lucretia Borgia's golden hair as she absent-mindedly spins an ornate ring on her finger. You can almost taste the metallic tanks of fear in the air as dinner guests eye their wine goblets suspiciously. Lucretia Borgia's poison ring. Fact versus fiction. Picture Rome at the turn of the 16th century, where the Borgia family's reputation precedes them like a dark cloud. Lucretia, the Pope's daughter, stands at the center of it, all accused of everything from incest to mass murder via poisoned wine. But here's what really keeps historians up at night. Was she a ruthless manipulator or just a pawn in her family's bloody rise to power? The mainstream historical record shows Lucretia was married off 3 times for political advantage, with 2 husbands dying suspiciously. But the fringe accounts tell wilder tales, like her alleged cantarella poison, supposedly distilled from a secret recipe involving decomposed pork, which would have made victims' corpses bloat grotesquely. Modern chemists confirm no such toxin existed. But the myth persists because it fits our image of Renaissance intrigue. Here's the quirky detail that changes everything. Lucretia may have invented modern PR spin when rumors swirled about her pregnancy during a period without a husband. She publicly displayed a miraculously swollen abdomen that turned out to be a cushion, then revealed the stunt to prove how easily people believe gossip. Historians still argue whether her famed poison ring was real or just a psychological weapon. Recent archive discoveries show she actually owned a hollow ring, but it contained perfume. The darkest truth. Lucretia's real crime may have been surviving in a world that punished powerful women. Her later years as Duchess of Ferrara reveal. A patron of the arts who transformed her court into a Renaissance cultural hub, as sleep claims you. Imagine Lucretia smiling enigmatically from her portrait, knowing the most potent poison isn't in wine, it's in the stories people tell about you. The Tudor court holds its breath as Anne Boleyn raises her hand, that infamous 6th finger glinting with rings in the candlelight. Or does it? You strain to see the deformity that supposedly proved her witchcraft, but the shadows dance just out of focus. Anne Boleyn's 6th finger and other Lyciar in 1530s England, where Henry VIII's obsession with Anne has already shattered the Catholic Church's hold on the country. But as their passion sours, the king's propagandists go to work reconstructing his fiery lover into a monster. The 6th finger story takes root despite 0 contemporary accounts mentioning it until after her execution. Modern historians note that a minor nail deformity, possibly an inherited condition called polydactyly, became exaggerated into a full extra digit through the game of royal telephone. The mainstream record shows Anne's real crimes were failing to produce a male heir and being too politically outspoken. But the fringe accounts revealed darker psychological warfare. Rumors she had a 3rd nipple, a witch's mark. That she seduced Henry with French love potions. Even that her miscarriage of a male fetus was actually the birth of a deformed demon child. None appear in any document until after her beheading. Here's the quirky detail that changes everything. Anne may have weaponized her own rumors. Some letters suggest she encouraged the witchcraft gossip early on to appear more mystically alluring to Henrietta. Dangerous game that backfired spectacularly. The darkest truth lies in the Tower of London's inventory records. Among items confiscated at her arrest was a book of French poetry with margins filled in her handwriting. Historians still argue whether these were love notes or coded political messages. But their existence proves the real Anne was far more complex than the six-fingered caricature. As you drift off, picture Anne's ghost running a finger just 5 along the spines of those books, whispering that history belongs not to those who write it first, but to those who write it last. The palace mirrors catch Elizabeth I's reflection a dozen times over as she examines her bare face, no wrinkles yet. But the Venetian ambassador's latest dispatch stings. Her Majesty's beauty now lives chiefly in her reputation. You watch as she reaches not for cosmetics, but for a draft of the Virgin Queen propaganda that will define her for centuries. Elizabeth's Eyes Virginity Riddle, the ultimate rebrandier in 1580s England, where the Queen's marriage prospects have cooled along with her childbearing years. What began as a political necessity, remaining unmarried to avoid foreign domination, has morphed into something far more potent, a sacred myth. The Virgin Queen persona isn't just about chastity. It's about transforming female weakness into divine strength. Court poets compare her to the moon goddess Diana. Painters depict her holding a civ symbol of vestal virginity, and subjects genuinely debate whether her untouched state grants mystical powers. The mainstream historical record shows Elizabeth likely had romantic entanglements, particularly with Robert Dudley. But the fringe accounts suggest a more complex reality. Secretary William Cecil allegedly kept a locked chest of the Queen's private correspondence that burned mysteriously after her death. Here's the medical detail that changes everything. Elizabeth may have had Rokitansky syndrome, a congenital condition rendering vaginal intercourse painful or impossible. This would explain her visceral terror of marriage negotiations while allowing for romantic attachments. Historians still argue whether her famous speech at Tilbury, "I have the heart and stomach of a king," was feminist defiance or clever propaganda. The darkest whispers suggest her virginity myth concealed darker secrets. Some Restoration era documents imply she bore Dudley's child in secret, though these are almost certainly fabrications. As you drift off, picture Elizabeth's skeletal hand penning her last will, not a single private confession, just a carefully curated legacy floating like white lace against the crimson of Tudor history. The Swedish winter wind howls through the castle corridors as Queen Christina kicks off her high-heeled shoes and strides into council meetings wearing men's breeches and a defiant glare. The shocked gasps of her advisors are almost as satisfying as the freedom of movement. Christina of Sweden's gender-bending courtier in 1650s Stockholm, where Europe's most brilliant and baffling monarch holds court. The daughter of the warrior, King Gustavus Adolphus, refuses every marriage proposal, sleeps with a loaded pistol under her pillow, and has turned the royal palace into a den of philosophers, artists, and at least one accused necromancer. Her latest scandal, appointing a woman as court librarian, heard of in an age when most noble women's education ended at embroidery. The mainstream historical record shows Christina abdicated at 28, converted to Catholicism, and fled to Rome. But the fringe accounts reveal wilder truths. How she tested her ladies-in-waiting by accidentally dropping snakes in their laps, or her alleged affair with Cardinal Azzolino that involved encrypted love. Letters now preserved in the Vatican archives. Here's the medical detail that changes everything. Christina may have been intersex. Modern historians examining her exhumed skeleton noted masculine pelvic features, while contemporary accounts describe her deep voice and facial hair. She famously declared, "I am neither man nor woman, I am myself." Historians still argue whether her shocking abdication was a philosophical rejection of power or a tactical retreat from Lutheran hardliners. The darkest whispers suggest she poisoned her own cousin to secure the succession first as sleep takes you. Picture Christina's ghost wandering the Vatican's secret archives, still laughing at scholars who try to categorize her. Some rulers make history, this one refused to be contained by it. The scent of parchment and rose oil fills Eleanor of Aquitaine's solar as troubadours compete to outdo each other's verses. The queen doesn't just listen, she judges, her sharp wit cutting through flowery metaphors like the knife she keeps tucked in her girdle. This isn't just a poetry contest. It's the original reality show with much higher stakes. Eleanor's Court of Love, where knights competed in verse, and Bedjar in 12th century Poitiers, where Europe's most powerful woman presides over a revolutionary experiment. At her Court of Love, knights prove their worth, not through jousting, but through poetry, with Eleanor and her daughter Marie judging whose verses best captured true romance. The mainstream historical record shows these courts codified chivalric love, but the fringe accounts suggest they were also Eleanor's intelligence network, where pillow talk became political leverage. Historians still argue whether Eleanor actually wrote the famous love laws attributed to her, including Rule #12. A true lover desires embraces from no one but his beloved. What's undeniable is how she weaponized desire when her first husband Louis VII proved inadequate. She had their marriage and married his greatest rival, Henry II. 8 weeks later, here's the spicy detail that changes everything. Eleanor may have staged her own abduction by Henry to speed up the annulment. Contemporary chroniclers note how suspiciously convenient it was that her captors just happened to intercept her travel party with a wedding dress in their luggage. The darkest whispers claim she took revenge on Henry by encouraging their sons to rebel, leading to her 16-year imprisonment. Yet, even confined, she ruled through letters. Her network of courtly lovers now transformed into a shadow government. As you drift toward dreams, picture Eleanor at 80, still sharp enough to outmaneuver kings half her age, still certain that love, whether romantic, maternal, or political, was the ultimate battlefield. The candle has burned low now, its flickering light softening the edges of these formidable women who refuse to play by men's rules. Theodora's defiance, Christina's rebellion, Eleanor's cunning, their stories linger like perfume in heavy velvet drapes, proof that power wears many faces. Perhaps history remembers them as scandalous because the world wasn't ready for women who dared so boldly. Or perhaps we keep retelling their stories because we secretly envy their freedom to love whom they chose, rule as they saw fit, and leave the consequences for others to gasp over. As the last embers glow in the hearth, let their complexities fade into the comfortable haze of half-sleep. The brothel dancer turned empress, the virgin queen who shaped an empire, the scholar monarch who walked away from a throne, they've all taken their bows now. Your eyelids grow heavy, the whispers of history softening into wordless lullabies. The sheets are cool, the night is quiet, and the remarkable women who once shook kingdoms have settled back into their portraits, waiting for the next dreamer willing to see past the scandals to the souls beneath. Sweet dreams. The imperial bedchamber reeks of burnt herbs and desperation as Agrippina the Younger watches her son Nero toy with a dagger. She remembers teaching him to wield it back, when she still believed she could control the monster she created. Agrippina's deadly motherly love, the ultimate betrayalier in first-century Rome, where maternal ambition curdles into nightmare. Agrippina isn't just any mother, she's the great-granddaughter of Augustus, sister to one emperor, wife to another, and mother to Nero. Her entire life has been a chess game played with living pieces, and she's about to become a sacrificed pawn. The mainstream historical record shows Agrippina schemed relentlessly to make Nero emperor, poisoning her husband Claudius with mushrooms. Historians still argue whether she used a single lethal dose or gradual accumulations, eliminating rivals, even allegedly seducing her son to maintain influence. But the fringe accounts revealed darker psychological games, like forcing young Nero to watch tortures to harden him, or keeping Claudius's ghostly death mask by her bed. Here's the architectural detail that changes everything. Agrippina designed a collapsible pleasure barge to drown Nero's Antony for Nero to later reuse the mechanism in his failed attempt to kill her. The sinking ship became their twisted family tradition. Historians still debate whether Agrippina's final words strike here, as she pointed to her womb, were defiance or despair. When Nero's assassins closed in, the woman who shaped an emperor died by the very violence she'd cultivated. As sleep claims you. Picture Agrippina's blood seeping between the floor tiles of her villa, the same pattern as the mosaic she commissioned showing her divine ancestors. Even in death, she staged the scene. Section 17. The Frankish feast hall falls silent as Queen Fredegund raises her jeweled goblet, the same one her rival just drank from. You watch the panic in the other woman's eyes as she realizes too late why the wine tastes oddly sweet. Fredegund's poisoned rain. Medieval murder made easier in 6th century Francia, where Merovingian queens don't fight fair. Fredegund, a former slave turned king's mistress turned queen, treats assassination like other women treat embroidery an art form to be perfected. When her husband, King Chilperic, is murdered likely by her orders, she seizes power as regent and begins eliminating threats with terrifying efficiency. The mainstream historical record documents her poisoning bishops, burning enemies alive in churches, and allegedly murdering her own stepchildren. But the fringe accounts reveal her true innovation: customized murders. For a bishop who criticized her, laxatives mixed into communion wine so he'd soil his robes mid-sermon before the fatal dose. For a romantic rival, perfume that caused blistering rashes before organ failure. Here's the medical detail that changes everything. Fredegund may have pioneered delayed action poisons using compounds that mimicked natural illnesses. When her daughter Riganth tried to poison her, Fredegund forced the girl to drink the entire vial, then calmly took the antidote she'd prepared beforehand. Historians still argue whether her infamous mourning period after Chilperic's death, where she wore white instead of black while systematically executing suspects, was grief or theater. The darkest truth: she died peacefully in bed. Her son Clothar II inheriting a kingdom purified by her poisons. As you drift off, imagine Fredegund's ghost, smiling as modern forensic scientists still can't identify half the toxins in her arsenal. Some recipes deserve to be lost. Section 18. The Byzantine throne room echoes with the screams of the blinded prince as his mother Irene watches, her jeweled hands steady. The surgeon said removing the eyes would take less than a minute if done properly. She insisted they take their time. Irene of Athens, the mother whom a meteor in 8th century Constantinople, where Empress Irene does the unthinkable to keep power, she orders the mutilation of her own son. When Constantine VI attempts to overthrow her, she doesn't just depose him. She renders him permanently ineligible to rule by Byzantine standards through deliberate blinding. The mainstream historical record shows she then ruled alone as Europe's first female emperor. Not Empress, she used the male title Basileus. Historians still argue whether this was ruthless pragmatism or twisted. Lovesome letters suggest she believed the disfigurement would save his soul from ambition. The fringe accounts claim she attended the blinding with a relic of the true cross, framing it as religious sacrifice. Here's the artistic detail that changes everything. Irene likely commissioned the Palladoro altarpiece showing the Virgin Mary holding the Christ child in an eerily similar pose to her own official portraits with young Constantine. The sacred mirroring her sins, the darkest irony. After fighting for decades to restore icons during the iconoclasm controversy, Irene was eventually overthrown and exiled to Lesbos, where locals reported seeing a blind beggar who sang hauntingly. Accurate imperial edicts as sleep takes you. Picture Irene's gilded cage on Lesbos. The Aegean wind carrying her son's voice from some distant alley to ruined rulers. Bound by blood and betrayal. Section 19, the Breton lace of Anne's wedding gown tears, as she's rushed into yet another consummation chamber. At 12 years old, she's about to become Europe's most frequently re-virginized. Bride. Anne of Brittany's hymen politics, the ultimate royal reset button year in 15th century France, where Duchess Anne's fertile womb is the most contested territory in Europe. Married first by proxy to a Habsburg at 12, then forcibly wed to Charles VIII of France, she's required to renew her virginity before each political remarriage. The mainstream historical record shows her ingenious solution: a clause in her marriage contract stating Brittany would remain semi-independent, making her Europe's only two-time French queen consort. But the fringe accounts reveal the gynecological theater behind this, doctor's affidavits attesting to her intactness before each wedding, the strategic use of menstrual rags to fake bloodstains, and the whispered rumor that she sewed thin membranes from fish bladders as physical proof. Here's the legal detail that changes everything. Anne's third marriage contract to Louis XII included an unprecedented clause requiring him to wait 40 days before consummation, not for piety, but to ensure any pregnancy from her recently deceased husband wouldn't be contested. Historians still debate whether her 7 minor miscarriages resulted from childhood pregnancies or the fertility treatments of the Erewhon recipe involved powdered stag penis and mercury. The darkest truth: this chessmaster queen died at 36, her body exhausted from the very dynastic games she'd mastered. As you drift toward sleep, picture Anne's ghost counting the rings on her fingers, one for each husband, each oath, each carefully staged virginity. A life measured in resets, Section 20. The castle's stone walls weep with condensation as Countess Erzsébet, Bathory's latest maidservant, struggles against the iron contraption. The girl doesn't realize the true horror isn't the pains. How meticulously her blood is being collected in that silver basin. The blood countess, monster, or misogynist myth. You're in 17th century Hungary, where aristocratic privilege meets Gothic horror. The mainstream historical record states Bathory was walled up in her own castle after being convicted of torturing and killing over 600 peasant girls, allegedly bathing in their blood to preserve her youth. But the fringe accounts suggest something far more complex: a powerful widow whose lands were coveted by the Habsburgs. Her crimes possibly exaggerated to avoid executing a noblewoman. Historians still argue over the trial transcripts. Many witnesses were tortured. And the infamous blood-bathing story appears only in later pamphlets. The quirky forensic detail: modern archaeologists found her alleged torture chamber to be an ordinary sauna. Here's the medical theory that changes everything. Bathory may have suffered from porphyria, a blood disorder causing photosensitivity and madness, which could explain both her reclusiveness and the blood fascination. Or perhaps she was simply a sadist in an era when nobility could act with impunity. The darkest footnote: her family seal featured a dragon biting its own tail, an omen of self-destruction. As sleep claims you, picture Erzsébet's ghost pacing that tiny, windowless room where she spent her final years, still whispering that history is written by those who hold the quill. And the wind down fire has burned to embers now, its glow softening the edges of these women who danced on history's knife edge. Agrippina's poisoned mushrooms, Fredegonde's customized toxins, Anne's fish bladder virginity. Stories blur together like ink on vellum. Key, equal parts inspiration and cautionary tale. Perhaps we're drawn to these queens, not for their scandals, but for their sheer audacity to play the game when the rules were stacked against them. They loved too fiercely, ruled too boldly, and paid prices we can scarcely imagine their lives reduced to salacious footnotes in the chronicles of men. Let your breathing slow now, matching the rhythm of the night. The sheets are cool, the pillow soft. And these formidable women have returned to their portraits, their whispers fading into the comfortable silence between wakefulness and dreams. After all, history may judge them harshly, but tonight they reign supreme in your imagination, sweet dreams. The chapel bells toll midnight as Queen Urraca of Leon Castile paces before the smoldering hearth, her bare feet leaving bloody prints on the cold stone. The crown of Leon sits heavy on her brow, a crown she seized from her own husband after he dared strike her. You can almost smell the iron tang of the battlefield still clinging to her unwashed hair as she drafts the letter that will declare war on her former lover. Alfonso the Battler. Historians still argue whether Urraca's tumultuous reign, 1109 to 1126, was a product of her passionate nature or brilliant statecraft. The mainstream record shows she married twice, first to Raymond of Burgundy, who gave her a son, then to Alfonso I of Aragon in what became the most disastrous royal marriage of the 12th century. Their union dissolved into open warfare after Alfonso's brutal suppression of her Castilian nobles, but the fringe accounts revealed darker truths: how Urraca allegedly took a common soldier as a lover during the siege of Burgos. She supposedly poisoned Raymond when his usefulness expired, and how she may have deliberately provoked Alfonso's famous temper to justify their separation. Here's the architectural detail that changes everything. Urraca commissioned the first known royal apartments with separate bedrooms, not for modesty, but so she could control access to her person. The darkest whispers claim she kept a dagger and poison vial beneath her pillow until the day she died. The winter wind howls through Westminster's drafty halls as Eleanor of Provence counts her silver pennies by candlelight. The English queen's sharp eyes miss nothing, not the missing taxes from York, not her husband Henry III's wandering gaze toward the ladies' gallery, and certainly not the growing mob outside chanting death to the foreign queen. Eleanor's reign, 1236 to 1272, represents one of history's most fascinating cases of immigrant royalty loathed for her financial acumen. The mainstream record shows she introduced revolutionary accounting practices to the English treasury while bearing 5 children who would shape European history. But the fringe accounts tell of her alleged fairy blood through her provencal grandmother, her rumored affair with the famous troubadour Bernard de Ventadorn, and her possible role in the mysterious death of Simon de Montfort. Historians still argue whether her unpopularity stemmed from genuine mismanagement or xenophobia against her Savoyard uncles. The darkest truth: she may have faked her own death in 1291 to retire quietly to a French convent under an assumed name. Asterisk. The torchlight flickers across the blood-smeared walls of Burgos Castle as Queen Urraca of Leon Castile wipes her dagger clean on her ruined silk gown. The metallic scent of recent violence mixes with the earthy aroma of the castle's rushes. As she steps over the body of her husband, Alfonso's favorite knight, he wouldn't last 5 minutes in her world. Urraca, the warrior queen. Love, war, and regicide d'or. In 12th century Iberia, where the concept of a warrior queen wasn't romantic legend but brutal reality. Urraca didn't just inherit her father Alfonso VI's kingdoms, she fought tooth and nail to keep them. Her disastrous marriage to Alfonso I of Aragon, yes, they shared the same name, reads like a medieval soap opera crossed with a battlefield chronicle. The mainstream historical record shows their union dissolved after Alfonso's violent suppression of Castilian nobles, but the fringe accounts reveal the shocking personal betrayals. How Alfonso allegedly dragged Urraca by her hair through the streets of Sahag. How she responded by leading armies against him while visibly pregnant with his child. How she later took a Galician count as lover and co-commander, proving war. and passion made better bedfellows than her royal marriage. Historians still argue whether Urraca's military successes stemmed from strategic genius or sheer desperation. Her nighttime raid on the castle of Candaspina, where she reportedly scaled the walls herself in full armor, became legendary. But was this bravery or the act of a woman with nothing left to lose? Here's the archaeological detail that changes everything. Recent excavations of her campaign tents revealed luxurious furnishings alongside an arsenal of personalized weapons. This wasn't just a queen playing at war. She lived it. The darkest whispers suggest she poisoned both her father and first husband to secure power. Whether true or not, Urraca died as she lived, defiantly, leaving instructions to be buried in full. With her father's sword across her chest, the scent of burning tax records fills Westminster's counting room as Eleanor of Provence presses her royal seal into warm wax. Outside, London's mob howls for her blood, but the English queen's hands remain steady. She's survived worse than peasant revolts, like the time her own barons tried to drown her in the Thames. Eleanor, the accountant queen, finance, favoritism, and foreign hate picture 13th century England, where this Provençal noblewoman became the most hated queen consort in English history for being too good at math. Eleanor revolutionized royal finance by introducing double-entry bookkeeping from Italian merchants. But her meticulous records of every penny owed to the crown made her enemies at every level of society, the mainstream historical record shows. She raised taxes to fund her husband Henry III's architectural follies, like rebuilding Westminster Abbey. But the fringe accounts reveal her true financial masterstroke, creating England's first centralized customs system. Suddenly, every woolsack exported paid royal duties, and Eleanor kept the books herself in coded ledgers. Here's the economic detail that changes everything. Eleanor's favoritism toward her Savoyard uncles wasn't nepotism. It was a deliberate strategy to create a loyal administrative class outside England's fractious nobility. Her enemies retaliated by spreading rumors she bathed in the blood of English virgins to maintain her beauty. Historians still argue whether her unpopularity stemmed from xenophobia or genuine mismanagement. The darkest truth she may have orchestrated the mysterious death of Simon de Montfort, the rebel leader who nearly toppled her husband's reign, as sleep claims you. Imagine Eleanor's ghost still counting coins in some forgotten treasury, her abacus clicking like a medieval metronome, measuring England's march toward modernity. The Jerusalem sun beats down on Queen Melisend's elaborate headdress as she tears her son Baldwin's coronation decree in half. The sound of ripping parchment echoes across the courtyard, followed by the collective gasp of assembled nobles. At 45, the queen isn't about to surrender power to some untested boy, even if he is her own flesh and blood. Melisend's motherly love, a Crusader queen civil war yore in 1143 Jerusalem, where this half-Armenian queen rules the fragile Crusader state with an iron fist wrapped in silk gloves. Melisende wasn't just keeping the throne warm for her son Baldwin III. She'd fought too hard to maintain Christian control of the Holy Land to simply step aside. The mainstream historical record shows she ruled jointly with Baldwin for years before their relationship soured into open conflict. But the fringe accounts reveal shocking details: how she allegedly hired assassin sect members to intimidate his supporters, how she turned the Church of the Holy Sepulchre into her personal fortress during their civil war, and how she may have poisoned Baldwin's favorite warhorse to delay his military campaigns. Here's the architectural evidence that changes everything. Melisende's extensive additions to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre included a hidden stairway connecting her private chambers directly to the altar, allowing her to miraculously appear during key ceremonies. Historians still argue whether her eventual reconciliation with Baldwin was genuine or strategic surrender. The darkest whispers suggest her famous Psalter, with its bloody fingerprints on certain vengeful psalms, holds clues to her true feelings. As you drift off, picture Melisandre's gnarled hands still turning those Psalter pages in her retirement. Her eyes scanning not holy words, but the names of those who doubted her reign. Final. Wind-down candle has guttered out now, its last wisp of smoke curling toward the vaulted ceilings where these queens' faces peered down from faded frescoes. Araka's bloodied sword, Eleanor's ledgers, Melisandre's Psalter, their tools of power now rest in museum cases, their complexities reduced to exhibit labels. Perhaps we're drawn to these stories. It's because we recognize their modern echoes. The immigrant queen demonized for her competence, the mother refusing to be put out to pasture, the warrior forced to fight on multiple fronts. Their parchment might be brittle with age, but their struggles feel freshly inked. Let your breathing slow to match the rhythm of history itself, that endless cycle of rebellion and reinvention. The night is deep now, the lessons absorbed, and these formidable women can return to their tapestries until the next curious dreamer summons them. After all, the past never truly sleeps. It just waits for the right moment to be remembered. Sweet dreams. The scent of molten wax mixes with crushed rose petals as Tamar of Georgia seals another royal decree with her personal signet ring. The candlelight catches the rubies in her crown as she surveys the map of her expanding empire, a kingdom stretching from the Black Sea to the Caspian, all ruled by a woman the chronicles would call King of Kings. Tamar the King, Georgia's gender-bending monarchy in 12th century Caucasus, where Queen Tamar performs the ultimate political alchemy, ruling as a king while weaponizing her femininity. When her nobles protest, a woman cannot lead us into battle. She appears at the next campaign, 9 months pregnant, armored belly protruding beneath her chainmail. The message is clear. This womb produces heirs and victories. The mainstream historical record shows Tamar's reign. 1184 to 1213 marked Georgia's golden age, military expansions, architectural wonders, and a cultural flowering that produced epic poems celebrating her rule. But the fringe accounts reveal how she manipulated gender expectations, adopting male titles while commissioning icons depicting her with exaggerated feminine features, wearing armor to council meetings but sheer silks to diplomatic receptions. Here's the archaeological detail that changes everything. Recent excavations of Tamar's palaces reveal bathrooms with dual plumbing, one set of pipes carrying rosewater for her legendary baths, another leading to a hidden war room where she planned campaigns. Historians still argue whether her 2 marriages were love matches or political theater. The darkest whispers suggest she had her first husband, Yuri Bogolyubsky, castrated before exiling him, though. Georgian accounts claim he simply disappeared during a hunting accident, as sleep takes you. Picture Tamar's ghost riding across the Caucasus Mountains, her armor now gossamer, a sword still unsheathed, forever guarding the borders between history and legend. The pre-dawn mist clings to the walls of the Louvre as Blanche of Castile paces the nursery, one hand rocking the cradle of the future Louis IX, the other clutching a letter detailing the latest noble revolt. The ink smudges as her grip tightens. These French barons will learn what happens when they threaten a mother's legacy. Blanche the Iron, Queen, Crusader, Regent, and Relentless Mother picture France in 1226, where this Spanish-born Queen Regent holds a crumbling kingdom together with a combination of pious rhetoric and ruthless realpolitik. When her husband Louis VIII dies suddenly, Blanche takes control with unprecedented authority, arresting rebellious nobles, outmaneuvering the English, and crushing the Albigensian heresy while somehow maintaining her spotless Holy Mother reputation. The mainstream historical record shows Blanche ruled as regent for 12 years, but the fringe accounts reveal her psychological warfare. But But the fringe accounts reveal her psychological warfare, how she allegedly planted evidence of treason in rivals' chapels, how she used her son's purported healing miracles to bolster her authority, and how she may have staged her famous weeping Madonna spectacle to sway public opinion. Here's the liturgical detail that changes everything. Blanche commissioned a special book of hours showing herself as the Virgin Mary, holding the Christ child with young Louis' face substituted for Jesus. The message wasn't subtle. Historians still argue whether her famous clash with Count Raymond VII of Toulouse was religious fervor or land grab. The darkest truth. She likely engineered the suicide of her daughter-in-law Margaret's lover to preserve the royal bloodline as your eyelids grow heavy. Imagine Blanche's gnarled fingers still turning those illuminated pages, her prayers less pleas for divine mercy than battle plans in sacred guise. The Baltic wind carries the stench of burning thatch as Margaret of Denmark surveys Kalmar Castle's construction site. Her frozen breath mingles with the mortar fumes as she adjusts the sable fur around her shoulders. This union of Scandinavia will be built with Nordic ice in its foundations, and her own ambition as its cornerstone. Margaret the Unifier, one queen. 3 kingdoms here in 1389 Scandinavia, where this diminutive queen performs the ultimate geopolitical magic trick, binding Denmark, Norway, and Sweden into the Kalmar Union through a combination of strategic adoptions, economic pressure, and well-timed betrayals. At 10, she was married to the Norwegian king. At 22, she buried both husband and son, then outmaneuvered every male relative to control all 3 crowns. The mainstream historical record shows Margaret ruled for 30 years, without ever taking the title queen, preferring all-powerful lady and rightful heir. But the fringe accounts reveal her mastery of symbolic power, how she used saintly visions to justify her rule, how she manipulated Hanseatic trade networks to strangle rebellious cities, and how she may have poisoned her own nephew to prevent challenges to her adopted heir. Here's the nautical detail that changes everything. Margaret's personal ship, the Dragon's Bane, featured a unique rudder design allowing quicker turns, perfect for her infamous surprise inspections of coastal fortifications. Historians still argue whether her refusal to remarry was personal choice or political calculation. The darkest whispers suggest her famous chastity belt was less about virtue than preventing dynastic accidents as sleep pulls you under. Picture Margaret's ghost walking Kalmar's battlements in eternal winter, her ermine cloak fluttering like the banner of a united Scandinavia that wouldn't survive her. The embers have faded to ash now, their glow replaced by the first pale light of dawn filtering through stained glass. Tamer's sword, Blanche's book, Margaret's ship. These artifacts sleep in museums now, their owners' complexities sanded down to placard summaries. Perhaps we return to these women because we see in their struggles our own modern battles against expectations, against prejudice, against the erasure of our agency. Their parchment may be brittle, but their stories cut as sharp as any dagger. Let your breathing slow to match the rhythm of history's tide, that eternal ebb and flow of power and resistance. The night's lessons linger in the quiet hours before morning. These queens returning to their tapestries with knowing smiles, for history never truly sleeps. It waits, patient as a spider, for the next curious mind to stumble into its web. Sweet dreams. The scent of burning parchment mixes with incense as Isabella of France watches her husband Edward II's love letters curl to ash in the fireplace. The flames reflect in her cold blue eyes. This is merely the first step in a carefully orchestrated downfall. The Chivalf's revenge, Isabella's deadly coupure in 1326 England, where this French princess turned scorned queen is about to rewrite the rules of royal power. Isabella didn't just overthrow her husband, She executed the concept of unquestioned male monarchy itself. With her lover Roger Mortimer at her side and the kingdom's discontent as her weapon, she launches the invasion that will make her the most powerful woman in Europe. The mainstream historical record shows Isabella's Chevalf nickname came from her merciless pursuit of Edward and his favorites. But the fringe accounts reveal her psychological warfare, how she strategically wore widow's weeds months before Edward's actual death, how she circulated rumors of his unnatural relationships to undermine support, and how she may have staged her dramatic public reunions with son Edward III. For maximum emotional impact, here's the architectural detail that changes everything. Isabella's renovations to the Tower of London included a new private stairway connecting the royal apartments to the dungeons, perfect for late-night interrogations of political prisoners. Historians still argue whether Edward II truly died at Berkeley Castle or escaped to live as a hermit. The darkest whispers suggest Isabella kept his alleged heart in an enamel box, taking it out occasionally to remind herself of love's price, as sleep claims you. Picture Isabella's final years under house arrest, her once vibrant hair now white, her fingers tracing the outlines of that same enamel box, while her son rules the kingdom she gave him. The salty Adriatic wind whips through Maria of Castile's veils as she surveys Naples from her ship's deck. The city skyline shimmers in the heat haze, a kingdom she's ruled for 15 years without ever setting foot in it. The absentee queen, long-distance rule in medieval Europe. Picture 15th century Mediterranean politics, where Maria governs Naples through an elaborate system of encrypted letters, trusted ambassadors, and carefully cultivated rumors, while her husband Alfonso battles rebels in Catalonia. Maria's paper empire stretches from Barcelona to Naples, proving power doesn't require physical presence, just psychological dominance. The mainstream historical record shows Maria's reign, 1423 to 1458, was remarkably stable despite her never visiting Naples. But the fringe accounts reveal her methods, how she used identical twin messengers to confuse spies, how she required 3 different wax seals to authenticate documents, and how she allegedly poisoned an ambassador who mocked her petticoat government. Here's the cryptographic detail that changes everything. Maria's secret codebook, recently rediscovered in Barcelona's archives, shows she invented a cipher that changed daily based on the liturgical calendar, making her correspondence nearly unbreakable. Historians still argue whether her childlessness was biological or political strategy. The darkest truth: she may have deliberately remained in Spain to avoid becoming another foreign queen scapegoat for Naples' problems. As you drift toward sleep, imagine Maria's ghost still writing letters in some candlelit scriptorium, her words flowing across parchment like an army marching unseen through history's shadows. The scent of burning martyrs' flesh mixes with incense as Jadwiga of Poland kneels before the Wilno Cathedral altar. The Lithuanian convert's baptismal waters pool around her silk slippers. This political marriage has become a genuine religious crusade, and she'll see these pagan souls saved even if it kills her. Saint and strategist Jadwiga's holy ambition, where Europe's youngest crowned monarch, just 11 when anointed, is using sainthood as statecraft. Jadwiga's marriage to Lithuanian Grand Duke Jogaila, converting him from paganism to Christianity, creates the Polish-Lithuanian union that will dominate Eastern Europe for centuries. The mainstream historical record emphasizes Jadwiga's piety, but the fringe accounts reveal her political genius, how she leveraged her reputation for miracle working to outmaneuver nobles, how she strategically funded churches along disputed borders, and how she may have faked stigmata to strengthen her authority. During succession crises, here's the forensic detail that changes everything. Analysis of Jadwiga's skeleton shows evidence of self-flagellation wounds and fasting-induced osteoporosis. proof her asceticism wasn't just for show. Historians still argue whether her death at 25 resulted from childbirth, complications, or poisoning by Teutonic Knights. The darkest whispers suggest she knowingly sacrificed her health through extreme fasting to secure her legacy as sleep takes you. Picture Jadwiga's ghost walking the Wall Cathedral corridors, her bare feet leaving bloody prints only the pure of heart can see. The stench of Naples' summer heat mixes with rosewater as Giovanna II lounges in her bath, idly deciding which of her many lovers to name as heir today. The crown bobs in the tepid water between her knees, a toy for a queen. It's turned survival into an art form. The great heir game, Giovanna's Scandalous. Succession Crisiciar in 15th century Naples, where Queen Giovanna II plays Europe's powers against each other in a decades-long heir nomination farce. First, she names Alfonso of Aragon, then René of Anjou. Then back again, each switch accompanied by new lovers, new alliances, and new bodies floating in the Bay of Naples. The mainstream historical record shows Giovanna's 20-year reign, 1414 to 1435, was plagued by succession disputes. But the fringe accounts reveal her strategy, how she used her notorious fertility tests to humiliate potential heirs, how she kept 7 different crowns to match political moods, and how she allegedly poisoned her own husband James of Bourbon when he tried limiting her authority. Here's the gynecological detail that changes everything. Giovanna's medical records suggest she likely had severe endometriosis, making her much-discussed infertility less a biological fact than a political weapon. Historians still argue whether her final choice of René d'Anjou was genuine or last-minute spite against Alfonso. The darkest truth. She died smiling, knowing her carefully cultivated chaos would outlive her. As your eyelids grow heavy, imagine Giovanna's ghost still lounging in that marble bath. The water now blood-warm, the crown still just beyond anyone's grasp. The last candle gutters out, its dying light catching the gold leaf on these queens' illuminated stories. Isabella's revenge, Maria's letters, Jadwiga's stigmata, Mailly's Vea tools of power now rest in glass museum cases, their complexities reduced to exhibit labels. Perhaps we return to these women because we recognize their modern parallels: the leaders, balancing image and action, the strategists working within constraints, the rebels rewriting rules. Their parchment may be fragile with age, but their lessons remain startlingly fresh. Let your breathing slow to match history's rhythm, that eternal dance of ambition and consequence. The night's stories settle into memory now, queens returning to their portraits with knowing smiles. For history never truly ends. It simply waits for the next curious mind to turn its page. Sweet dreams. The scent of molten gold mixes with dragon's blood incense as Barbara of Scilly traces protective sigils on her husband Sigismund's battle armor. The Holy Roman Emperor doesn't believe in her witchcraft until he needs it to survive Hussite rebellions and assassination attempts. The Dragon Queen. Alchemy, ambition, and imperial witchcraft. You're in early 15th century Bohemia, where this Slovenian countess turned empress turned the imperial court into her occult laboratory. Barbara didn't just dabble in alchemy, she weaponized it, commissioning astrological clocks that doubled as assassination predictors and brewing protective elixirs that conveniently made rivals vomit during council meetings. The mainstream historical record shows Barbara served as regent during Sigismund's absences. But the fringe accounts reveal her true power, how she allegedly summoned a dragon during the Council of Constance to intimidate cardinals, how her flying cloak, likely an early parachute, saved her from a tower fall, and how she may have poisoned Sigismund's first wife to secure her position. Here's the technological detail that changes everything. Barbara's encrypted grimoire contained plans for a sound cannon, using focused harmonics, a weapon centuries ahead of its time that she tested on rebellious peasants. Historians still argue whether her infamous trial for witchcraft was genuine or political theater. The darkest whispers suggest she faked her own death in 1451 to continue her experiments in secret. The ledgers spread across Isabella of Portugal's desk glow like treasure maps in candlelight. Each column of numbers represents ships redirected, wool tariffs manipulated, and dukes quietly bankrupted. The Duchess of Burgundy's real power lies not in her crown, but in her double-entry bookkeeping. Asterisk, asterisk. The Accountant Duchess. Economics as warfare asterisk asterisk picture 1430s Bruges, where this Portuguese princess turned Philip the Good's third wife dominates Europe through financial engineering. Isabella didn't just balance Burgundy's books, she created history's first sovereign wealth fund, using Italian banking techniques to control commodity markets from English wool to Baltic grain. The mainstream historical record shows she bore 3 sons and negotiated the Treaty of Arras. But the fringe accounts reveal her economic warfare, how she deliberately triggered inflation in rival territories, how she created fake trade deficits to justify invasions, and how she may have invented fractional reserve banking decades before. The Medici. Here's the cryptographic detail that changes everything. Isabella's accounting system used color-coded inks, visible only under candlelight, red for military expenditures, gold for bribes, and an invisible lemon juice script revealing assassination budgets. Historians still argue whether her famous piety masked genuine faith or financial pragmatism. The darkest truth. She likely engineered the accidental drowning of her husband's favorite mistress after discovering the woman cost the treasury 2,000 gold florins annually. The winter wind whistles through Plessis-les Tours as Anne of Beaujeu watches her brother Charles VIII stumble during sword practice. Her knuckles whiten around the curtain. This unstable boy king could undo her life's work with one ill-advised treaty. Time to activate the Mad War contingency plans. Asterisk, asterisk, the Spider Regent. Weaving France's survival, asterisk, asterisk, you're in 1480s France, where Louis XI's daughter rules as Europe's most formidable regent. Anne didn't just navigate the Mad War against rebellious nobles, she ended it by systematically bankrupting, blackmailing, or disappearing every major opponent while maintaining her dutiful sister facade. The mainstream historical record shows Anne governed for 7 years. But the fringe accounts reveal her psychological operations. How she spread rumors of her brother's impotence to deter marriage alliances. How she used counterfeit coins to destabilize rebel economies. And how she allegedly trained crows to steal documents from noble camps. Here's the zoological detail that changes everything. Anne's menagerie contained message lynxes, big cats trained to carry encrypted collars through enemy territory, their natural ferocity ensuring safe passage. Historians still argue whether her sudden retirement was voluntary or enforced. The darkest whispers suggest she poisoned her own husband, Pierre de Beaujeu, when he questioned her methods. The acrid smell of Greek fire mixes with childbirth blood as Caterina Sforza stands on Ravaldino's battlements, skirts still curdled. The would-be conquerors below gape as she lifts her tunic and screams. The immortal challenge. I have the mold to make more children. The tigress of Forioque motherhood as armor. You're in 1499 Italy, where this illegitimate Sforza daughter turned condottiera redefined siege warfare. Caterina didn't just defend her fortress after her husband's murder, she turned childbirth into psychological warfare, conducting negotiations mid-labor and designing fortifications while nursing newborns than the mainstream historical record shows. She survived 3 sieges and multiple imprisonments. But the fringe accounts reveal her scientific genius. How her encrypted recipe books contained formulas for tear gas and contact poisons. How she grew venomous plants in her gardens. And how she may have infected Cesar Borgia's troops with tainted perfume during negotiations. Here's the botanical detail that changes everything. Caterina's medicinal gardens contained engineered nightshade hybrids. Their berries could heal or kill depending on preparation. A perfect metaphor for her reign. Historians still argue whether her legendary immortality elixir was placebo or proto-antibiotic. The darkest truth. She likely sacrificed her youngest son Giovanni to escape Borgia captivity. The scent of poisoned parchment mixes with orange. Blossom as Louise of Savoy tests another envelope seal. The Queen Mother's perfumed letters carry more than pleasant fragrances. They carry the fate of kingdoms to her son. Francois I and daughter Marguerite. Asterisk, asterisk. The Black Queen's Network. Perfume, poison, and power. Asterisk, asterisk. Picture 1520s France, where this duchess turned regent controls Europe through scented correspondence. Louise didn't just advise her son. She ran a continent-spanning intelligence network where lavender oil meant assassinate. Ambergris signaled bribe, and jasmine warned of treason. The mainstream historical record shows she negotiated Francois' release after Pavia. But the fringe accounts reveal her methods. How she trained parrots to repeat diplomatic secrets. How she used menopausal hot flashes to fake illness during crucial negotiations, and how she may have poisoned her husband, Charles d'Orleans, to secure her children's inheritance. Here's the olfactory detail that changes everything. Louise's perfume laboratory included scent portraits, customized fragrances mimicking rivals, body chemistry for psychological manipulation during meetings. Historians still argue whether her infamous Menopause Manifesto was feminist treatise or political distraction. The darkest whispers suggest she died from testing her own poisons. The last drop of wax seals these queen stories. Their complexities preserved like insects in amber. Barbara's dragon, Isabella's ledgers, Caterina's tunic flash. These moments crystallize into history under the weight of centuries. Perhaps we return to them because their struggles echo in our bones. The fight for agency, the price of power, the eternal balancing of love and ambition. Their vellum may yellow, but their truths remain vibrantly alive. Let the night's lessons settle into your marrow as sleep claims you. These queens have had their say, their whispers fading into the comfortable silence between heartbeats. For history never truly sleeps. It dreams through us, waiting to be awakened. Sweet dreams.